I'm going to show you how freight brokers get their rates. First, we use data. There are many different companies that offer insights into the current market rates, but the two main ones right now are DAT and FreightWaves. Let's jump on DAT and run a lane. This is RateView by DAT. In the top left-hand corner here, you get to pick your trailer type: van, flatbed, or reefer. In this case, we're going to pick van. Now, I already put in Atlanta, Georgia to Vineland, New Jersey, but you can put in whatever it is that you need to quote. Hit search, and then here are the results that you get. So as you can see, we don't just have data in the form of how much you're going to pay in the past 3 days, as you can see here, but you have a trailing 12 months. And if you hover over and click, it'll stick and show you what the high and the low was reported for that lane and give you an average. So for over here in June, the most a truck was reported to be paid was $2,183. The least amount a truck reported payment was $1,670. Now this is on a 3-digit zip. So up here in the top left-hand corner, we have our days, and this is going to affect what happens over here, which we're going to do in a minute. But then we also have how far out we are going from our pick and our destination. Now we don't get to choose this by miles. That would be really nice, but we don't get to do that. Instead, we can go by 3-digit zip, market, X market, or region. Now, 99% of the time, unless I'm going from one very populated major city to another, I pick market. As you can see, it's 766 miles, and it's saying going from this area to this area within the last 3 days, the average payment was $1,609. The highest reported payment was $1,678, and the lowest was $1,532. And if we look at the trend, if we just go back last month, well, it's within $8 of the low, within about $60 of the average, and about $70 or so, $60 of the high. Now over here on the top left, I don't really depend on 3 days worth of data. I don't think that that is a substantial amount of data to be able to go off of. And so I would take this and compare it to the 7-day, which is showing me 1670, already a big jump and matching what it was last month. This is more dependable in my opinion. Then we have 15 days. That matches. 30 days, it goes up by $8. So this 3-day dip, I don't trust that at all, because 7-day, 15-day, and 30-day are all within $8 of each other. So now I know that I'm going to be paying about $16.78 to a truck. Another cool thing that DAT is doing here is it's showing me that this is a tight area. So as we click on it, it takes us to market conditions. As you can see, this is a very tight area. It says plus 100, very tight capacity. Now I'm not going to explain market conditions on a full breakdown here, but basically red is tight and blue is going to be loose, and anything in between is in between. Remember, when it's a tight location, it means that there are not enough trucks for the amount of loads. And so the drivers do have more power and more negotiating room. Up top here, we are still looking at a time frame. This is an 8-day forecast on what it thinks or predicts that the market will pay within the next 8 days, or at least the condition that it will be in. Let's look at current day. Very tight. Prior 8 days. Very tight, but not as tight. And then the last 30 days. Same story, very tight. I personally do not trust any type of forecast, whether it be DAT or FreightWaves. I don't go by the forecast. I look at 30-day prior data, and I look at 7-day prior data. And that's all. I would imagine $1,700 will be paid to a truck. And if it were me, just because of the areas, depending on, other factors that we will talk about shortly, just saying that it was neutral and it wasn't hard to load and there was no special requirements, I personally would probably quote about $1,850 on this. So now that we can see how much we'll likely pay a truck on this lane, how much do we add to it for our margin? 15% is pretty standard, but there are other factors that experienced brokers will consider that new brokers may not. For one, we need to consider the area. Is the shipper in a place that there's a ton of different trucks just in this small concentrated area? If so, we can be pretty aggressive with our quote, and we can quote with less room off the average. But if it's in an area with fewer trucks and most trucks are 100 plus miles away, then we need to be a bit more careful. Basically, we are going to try to cover that load at the average market rate. But if we can't find a truck in the immediate area, we're going to have to pull from further out, 100 miles, maybe even 150 miles, which is obviously going to cost more money. Now, I call this strategy make or break even. And it's my most common strategy whenever I'm quoting a new lane. It's really simple. If I had to pay a carrier for 150 miles of deadhead to take this load, what would be my cost on that? How much would I have to pay that carrier? And I quote that. Worst case scenario, I break even. Best case, I make a fair margin. But you might be saying, hey, break even, what are you talking about? We're not here to break even, we're here to make money. I know. But there is no crystal ball telling you what you're going to pay on a lane that you have not recently ran. Even if you ran it in the past, if you haven't ran it recently, you don't know what it's going to be because this is a market. And like any market, it fluctuates. But this is a really good low risk strategy while you learn the lane because you don't know what it pays right now. And so when you run it, you are going to learn and you can adjust your rates after you run a few for that customer. Another thing to consider is the destination. Not just the shipping location, but the destination. Is this load going to take a carrier to a desirable location or a non-desirable location? So an example of a bad location would be sending the truck to an area that has more trucks than loads, also known as a loose area. Or maybe it's just 200 miles out into the middle of nowhere. The less desirable the location, the more you need to add to the margin as a buffer. After all, we are ultimately guessing what we're going to pay. And the last thing you should really consider here is the commodity itself. Is it overweight? Is it oversized? Is it dirty? Is it bad for tarps or even potentially going to rip the carrier's tarps? Does it need other things like ramps or load levelers? Or does it have driver assist? And even if it just takes forever to load or unload, all of these things can increase the rate. Now, the second way to get rates is to reach out to carriers direct. And you want to find carriers that run those specific lanes. So using DAT as an example again, they have something called Lane Makers, and this is a really good tool for this. Let's check that out. So this is Lane Makers. Up on the top left-hand corner, we have report type. Now you can pick two different things here, carrier activity or broker activity. Since I'm a broker and I'm looking for a carrier, I'm going to stick with carrier activity. Next, you have two options to include either full or partials or both. I just want full truckload shipments, that's all I do, and I don't want anybody who does partials, so I click full. Next, I'm going to go only, and I'm going to put in vans, but this is where you would put in your trailer type. So you could do flatbed, van, or reefer if it can go on any of those. If it can go into a van or reefer, then you can click that. I am just going to put van. From Atlanta, Georgia, like we talked about, over to Vineland, New Jersey. I'm only in 30 days in a market zip, or a market area rather. And so if I look at truck postings, AD Express has posted up 9 times trying to go, 9 times in the last 30 days, mind you, trying to go from around Atlanta, Georgia to around Vineland, New Jersey. This would be a great person to call and say, hey, I have a load potentially that I'm trying to quote and win. It would go next week and there would be 3 a month. How often are you in the area and what would it cost for you to do this run for me? You can take that rate and you can quote your customer and then go down to the next one. Also, 9 times this carrier, either IIK or LLK, one or the other, transport, is trying to go again from right around Atlanta, Georgia to right around Vineland, New Jersey. Now, I will say that this first carrier probably has a little bit better of a chance since they're out in Newtown, PA, and maybe that's close to their home. All right. Whenever you get here, then this guy's going to be in Chicago. Then you have this one down here, Erdner Bros. That's going to be Swedesboro, New Jersey, which is not too far. So this is something that you can definitely use. It is a great, great tool to be able to help you quote. And then there's another strategy that brokers use, and I'm going to tell you guys right now, do not do this. This is not a good strategy. Don't post loads you don't have just to hear rates. I know it's faster, and it's definitely easier, but it's wasting a carrier's time when the load's not real. Or at least it's not real yet. Next, we're going to be talking about year-round rates, but before we get there, I want to wrap up this spot market stuff. Basically put, we determine what we're going to quote a customer by using historic data and by reaching out to carriers that we've used on similar lanes, as well as utilizing software that matches us with potential carriers that run those lanes. And by historic, I don't mean old. Everything has to be relatively new. It has to be recent. So I mean very recently reported but concrete data on what carriers have accepted recently. So as brokers, we do not drive up rates and we don't drive them down. Okay, if anything, we add just a very small amount of stability to rates. It's not strong stability. Big swings are not going to be something that we can combat. Now we're going to talk about year-round rates. And these can be tricky. All right, so what are year-round rates? Basically, a year-round rate is when a customer says, hey, I want one rate that you're going to honor for the next 12 months. And as you can probably guess, that's pretty tough to do. So in order to quote these, which personally I have chosen just to not participate in any of these, but we need to look at the prior 12 months of data. We look at each month and add them together. We then divide it by 12 to find our average. Very simple. After that, we need to take the market forecast into consideration. Are we in a falling market that we believe is going to keep getting cheaper? Do we think the market is stable? Or do we think that costs will rise? If you choose to participate in year-round rates, I strongly advise you to always assume that the market will rise. Expecting the market to dip is not the same as betting on it, especially when time is a factor. Maybe it does dip, we don't know, but even if it does dip, you could be 6 months into taking serious losses. You do not want to look back on the year and see that you ultimately lost money. Another thing that you need to observe is the seasonality of the lanes. Many lanes have spikes and dips throughout the year and usually at the same time every single year. You need to study these. Year-round rates are not for the faint of heart. You must be comfortable potentially taking losses for months at a time and hoping that when the peak season comes for your lanes, that you make enough profits to make it worth it in the long run. So here's my advice, okay, which I want to give you on this, because I've seen a lot of people do year-round rates and it not work out for them, or even get fired because they were taking too many losses up front. So my advice, don't start a year-round commitment on a loss. If you decide to participate, make sure you are beginning in a neutral or profitable time of the year for the lanes. If you start out taking the lows and losing $400, $500, or even $300 a load, I don't know if you'll make it at the company until you get to a place where you're starting to make the peaks, where you're starting to see those spikes, where you're making $500, $600 a load. And so if the bid starts at a bad time, when you would start off taking those losses, either quote high, very high, so that you're even making money or breaking even during that neutral or bad time. And if not, just pass. Missing out on a potentially good deal is a hell of a lot better than participating in a bad deal. And lastly, ask for advice. Someone else in the company will help you. Try to find someone who runs a similar lane first and look at that data. But if you are new or just still uncomfortable quoting customers, ask for help. If you'd like to learn more about how to become a freight broker, you can go sign up for our free course at leagueloads.com. Just click on free training, or if you can't remember that, just go to ican'tremember.com and it'll take you to the same place. Goodbye.